I trusted my son too much, and I mean that in the worst possible way a father can. I keep coming back to that sentence. I've said it out loud, maybe a dozen times, since everything came apart, testing whether it still felt true. It does. Every single time. My name is Edwin. I'm 67 years old, and for the past 14 months, I had been living in my son's house like a guest who overstayed his welcome and didn't know it yet. After my wife passed, her name was June, and she was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday and kept lavender sachets in every drawer. I didn't know what to do with a house that size. 4 bedrooms, a yard she had planned it herself, hydrangeas along the fence, a raised vegetable bed she'd been tending since the 90s. I'd walk through the kitchen at 6 in the morning and the silence would land on my chest like something physical. So when my son, Nathaniel, suggested I come stay with him and his wife for a while, I said yes before he finished the sentence. I want to be clear about something, because I've had plenty of time to think about it. Nathaniel was not a bad child. He was a quiet boy who became a driven man. And somewhere along the way, driven turned into something I didn't have a word for yet. His wife, Sandra, was polished in the way that made you feel slightly underdressed, no matter what you were wearing. She smiled with everything except her eyes. I'd noticed it for years, but told myself I was being uncharitable. I moved into their guest room with 2 suitcases and a box of June's things I couldn't bring myself to leave behind. The house was beautiful. Tall ceilings, a kitchen with marble countertops, a driveway that fit 3 cars. My son did well for himself, and I was proud of that. I told him so. I told him often, maybe too often, which is probably how I missed what I should have been looking at. The first few months were fine. Not warm exactly, but fine. I'd make coffee in the mornings before anyone else was up, sit by the window in the living room, read. Nathaniel left early for work. Sandra had what she called appointments that seemed to fill her entire week. I'd see her at dinner mostly, or passing through the hallway with a dry clean bag over her arm. We were polite to each other, carefully polite. The kind of polite that doesn't cost you anything because you're not actually giving anything. It was around the 5th month that things started shifting, and I want to say here that the shifts were so small, I almost didn't register them. Nathaniel started bringing paperwork home. He'd sit at the dining room table after dinner with folders spread out, and he'd talk, not to me, but near me, about estate planning, about tax obligations, about how complicated things got when property wasn't structured correctly. He was a financial consultant. He knew things I didn't. I listened the way I always had, with the assumption that he was competent and that his concern was genuine. One evening, he put a document in front of me. He said it was a property consolidation form, something to do with how my house was titled, how it would pass cleanly if something happened to me. He said June had set things up in a way that created complications. He said he just wanted to protect me. I picked up the pen. I almost signed it. Something stopped me. I don't know what exactly. Maybe it was the way Sandra had wandered into the room right at that moment, casual, but watchful, leaning against the door frame with her arms crossed. Maybe it was the way Nathaniel's voice had a brightness in it that didn't match the seriousness of what he was saying. I set the pen down and said I wanted to read it first. He said, "Of course, take your time," but there was a flicker of something across his face. Gone in a second. But I'd seen it. I put the papers in my bedside drawer and didn't sleep much that night. The following Saturday, Nathaniel said he had some errands to run and asked if I wanted to get out of the house. He knew a place, a neighborhood bar, low-key, good burgers. I said sure. I was glad to go anywhere, honestly. The guest room had started to feel like a place I was being kept. The bar was called Harmon's. It was the kind of place that had been there for 30 years and hadn't tried to update itself, which I respected. Dark wood, a long counter, a few televisions playing a game nobody at the bar was watching. We sat on stools and ordered drinks. Nathaniel had his phone out within 5 minutes, answering emails, and I nursed a club soda and looked around at nothing in particular. About 20 minutes in, Nathaniel said he had to step outside to take a call. He went. I stayed. The bartender, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with thick forearms and a gray beard trimmed close, slid over and topped off my club soda without being asked. He looked at me for a moment. Then he looked at the door where Nathaniel had gone. He said quietly, "You're Edwin Marsh, aren't you?" I looked at him. I didn't know him. I was certain I didn't know him. I said, "I am." He said, "I went to school with June. Brookfield High, class of '78. My name's Vic. Victor Osei." He extended his hand and I shook it. "She talked about you all the time whenever I ran into her. At the hardware store, at church a couple times. She was proud of you." I didn't know what to say to that. Something tightened in my throat the way it still sometimes does when someone mentions her name unexpectedly. He kept his voice low. He glanced toward the front door again. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything," he said, "but I've been seeing your son in here a lot. Not always with you." He paused. "A few months back, I overheard something I probably shouldn't have. Him and a man in a gray suit. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard your name, and I heard something about a deed transfer, and I heard the words, 'before he figures it out.'" The room went quiet around me, not silent. I could still hear the bar sounds, the game on television, someone laughing at a table near the back, but it went quiet in the way that happens when your mind starts working very fast and everything else drops away. I said, "How long ago was this?" This said, 6 weeks, maybe 7. I thanked him. He nodded once, the way men of a certain age do when they've done a difficult thing and don't need credit for it. He moved to the other end of the bar. I sat there for about 90 seconds. Then I took my club soda, walked toward the back of the bar where the restrooms were, and kept walking. The bathroom was a single room, small with a window above the sink. It was one of those old-style windows with a latch that swung outward. I turned the latch. It opened. The ledge was maybe 4 feet off the alley floor outside. I am 67 years old and I have 2 bad knees. I got out of that window anyway. The alley ran alongside the building and came out onto a side street. I walked to the corner and could see the front of the bar from there. Nathaniel was standing on the sidewalk, not on a phone call. He was talking to a man in a gray suit. I recognized the suit before I recognized why I recognized it. I stayed at the corner and I watched. The man in the gray suit had a leather portfolio under his arm. They were talking quickly, the way people talk when they're making sure of something. Nathaniel checked his watch. The other man nodded. They shook hands. I walked 2 blocks before I called a car. While I waited, I sat on a bench outside a dry cleaner and looked at the sidewalk and thought about June. June had always been the practical one. I was the one who trusted people too easily, who assumed good intentions, who believed that love was a bond that didn't need protecting. She was the one who read the fine print. She was the one who had insisted, back when we first bought the house, on making sure everything was properly documented. I used to tease her about it. I said she worried too much. She'd look at me over her glasses and say, "Someone has to." When I got back to Nathaniel's house, I went straight to my room. I took the folder from my bedside drawer, and I actually read it this time. I'm not a lawyer, but I spent 30 years as a civil engineer, and I can read a document. What I was looking at appeared to be a quitclaim deed, a form that would transfer my ownership of the property on Sycamore Drive entirely to Nathaniel's name, not both of us, not a trust, his name only. There was a line at the bottom waiting for my signature. I took a photograph of every page with my phone. Then I put the folder back exactly as it had been. The next morning, I drove to the house on Sycamore Drive. I hadn't been there in 3 months. The hydrangeas were still alive somehow, a little overgrown, still that shade of blue that June had spent years selecting. I sat in the driveway for a while. Then I went inside. It smelled the same. That hit me harder than I expected. I found what I was looking for in the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom that had served as June's home office. She'd always been meticulous. Everything labeled, everything in order. I found the folder for the house, the original deed, the mortgage payoff documentation, and something else I hadn't known existed. A trust document, dated 11 months before she died. I sat down in her office chair, and I read it. She had established a living revocable trust, with herself as the primary trustee and me as the successor trustee. The property on Sycamore Drive had been placed in that trust. The beneficiary, upon the passing of both trustees, was not Nathaniel. It was the university where June had done her nursing degree. She had left the house to a scholarship fund for students who couldn't afford it otherwise. I sat in that chair for a long time. I thought about what it meant that she had done this quietly, without telling me. Not because she wanted to keep a secret, I understood that now, because she had known something I hadn't let myself know. She'd known it, and she'd handled it the only way she could, the quiet, practical way she handled everything. And she'd never said a word to me because she knew it would have broken something between me and my son that she still hoped I wouldn't have to lose. She protected me from a distance she hadn't wanted to be at. I drove back to Nathaniel's house and I made dinner. I set the table and I called them both in and we ate. And I was as ordinary as I have ever been in my life. Nathaniel asked if I'd thought any more about the paperwork. I said I was still looking it over. He smiled. Sandra refilled her wine. I spent the next 4 days making phone calls. I contacted the university and confirmed the trust was active and properly recorded. I spoke with an attorney, an older woman named Bridget, who had been handling estate law for 30 years and who listened to my entire story without interrupting once. She confirmed that the quitclaim deed Nathaniel had asked me to sign would have done nothing. The house was already in trust and could not be transferred by my signature alone. But she also told me something else. What Nathaniel had attempted was a form of elder financial fraud, and if I wanted to pursue it, there was a record now. I asked her what my options were. She laid them out, all of them. I chose the one that didn't involve a courtroom, at least not yet. But I made sure there was documentation of everything. Every page. Every photograph. Vic's account in a written statement he agreed to give. The date of the conversation Nathaniel had had with the man in the gray suit. All of it. On a Thursday evening, I asked Nathaniel and Sandra to sit down with me after dinner. I told them I needed to talk about the house. Nathaniel looked relieved. He said he was glad I was ready to move forward, that this was the right thing, that he just wanted everything settled properly. He actually reached over and patted my hand. I let him finish, then I opened my laptop and I showed them the trust document. I explained what it was. I explained what it meant. I told them about my conversation with the attorney. I told them about Vic. I watched Nathaniel's face rearrange itself in real time, and it was the worst thing I've ever seen, and I hope I never see anything like it again, because it was the face of someone I had made breakfasts for and driven to soccer practice and sat next to at June's funeral, and it went from surprise to calculation in about 3 seconds flat. Sandra said it was a misunderstanding. Nathaniel said the document must not be valid. I closed the laptop. I said, I'm going to move back to the house on Sycamore Drive. I'll be out of here by Sunday. I looked at him. I don't want to talk about this anymore tonight. I think if we keep talking, one of us is going to say something we can't take back. What I didn't say, what I kept for myself, for just that moment, was that I think June knew he would try. I think she knew from the time he was young that something in him had gone sideways, and she loved him enough to grieve it privately and protect me from it quietly. She left me the house not because she didn't trust me with the money. She left it to the scholarship fund because she knew it was the one place Nathaniel couldn't follow. I packed my 2 suitcases on Saturday. I loaded the box of June's things into my car. I didn't say goodbye to Sandra. Nathaniel was standing in the driveway when I came out with the last bag, and he looked like he wanted to say something. He didn't. I put the bag in the trunk, got in the car, and drove away. The hydrangeas needed cutting back. The vegetable bed had gone to weeds, but the soil underneath was still good. June had always built things to last. I spent the first afternoon home on my knees in the yard, pulling weeds by hand, the way she used to. My knees ached. I didn't stop. I called Vic a few weeks later to thank him. He said, don't mention it. He said June was a good person and good people look after each other's, and I said that was exactly right. And we talked for a while about Brookfield High and people we both used to know, and I laughed for the first time in a long time. I still have the trust document. I keep it in the same filing cabinet, in the same folder, right where she left it. Sometimes I open the drawer just to know it's there. She was right about everything. She always was. I just wish I'd told her that more often while she was here to hear it. I've been back in this house for a few months now, and some mornings I still wake up surprised to find myself here. Surprised that I made it back. Surprised that June made sure I would. That's the part I keep turning over. Not what Nathaniel did. I've made a kind of peace with that. Or at least I've set it down somewhere I don't have to carry it every hour. What I keep returning to is June. The quiet, deliberate way she handled something she could see coming long before I could. She didn't make speeches. She didn't warn me. She just went and did the thing that needed doing, and then she trusted that it would hold. That's what I'd call real integrity. Not the kind you talk about at a dinner table, but the kind that shows up in what you actually do when no one's looking and the stakes are real. She didn't put the house in trust because she was angry at Nathaniel. She did it because she understood something about consequences. The choices people make, year after year, have a way of arriving at a destination. She could see where his road was going. She handled it without drama, without confrontation, and she didn't ask for any credit. That's character. That's what it looks like when someone's goodness isn't performed. And Vic. I think about Vic often. He didn't know me. He owed me nothing. He had every reason to stay out of it. It was someone else's family, someone else's trouble, a conversation he'd overheard by accident in a bar he worked at. But he had the clarity to recognize what was wrong and the courage to say something to a stranger's face anyway. That kind of clear-eyed honesty is rarer than people think. It requires you to stay awake, to not look away from what you're seeing, and then to act on it, even when it would be easier not to. Vic did that. He did it quietly and without expectation, and I will not forget it. As for me, I spent too long not seeing what was in front of me. I want to be honest about that. I trusted too easily and called it love. I looked at my son's life and saw what I wanted to see. There's a difference between faith in someone and willful blindness, and I blurred that line for years. That's not a comfortable thing to sit with, but I think sitting with it honestly is the only way through it. I've had to build something back in myself, a willingness to look at hard things directly and not flinch away from what they mean. Getting out of that bathroom window with 2 bad knees and driving back to Sycamore Drive and opening that filing cabinet. None of that was easy. But there's something I've learned about difficult things. They don't get done by people who feel ready. They get done by people who decide that not doing them is worse. I pulled weeds out of June's vegetable bed last weekend until my back told me it was time to stop. The soil underneath is still good. You can't always tell what's been preserved just by looking at the surface. She knew that. She always did.